Hello and welcome to the Mindset Coach podcast, the show where coaches and coaches-to-be tune in to learn how to integrate mindset coaching tools and neuroscience-based techniques into their practice and grow and scale a coaching business they love. Each week, I'll be sharing easy-to-implement tips, case studies, and business strategies that you can use right away to transform your own mindset and the mindset of those you coach. I'm your host, Lara Young, founder of the Mindset Coach Academy, author of 52 Adventures to Change Your Life, award-winning business owner, coach, and coach trainer. Tune into this podcast each Friday, free on all the podcasting apps, and click to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And remember, mindset is everything. Hello, everyone. Please join me in welcoming Christine Zaroura, who is a mystic mindset coach, wellness educator, spiritual guide, and writer who supports heart-centered and driven individuals who've surpassed the hardships of the past to connect with their true path and design their future. Christine is the owner of Mystic's Den, an online coaching business offering one-on-one services, supporting spiritual seekers tap into their higher calling on their journey of awakening. Christine brings all facets of who she is into her work, including practical goal-setting tools, intuitive gifts, mystical teachings, and personal stories, offering you a holistic approach to personal growth and spiritual development. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. And I know the work that you do is so incredibly interesting. So could you perhaps share with everyone how you got started with your coaching business?
I would agree with you that this work is really interesting. Did you say interesting?
I did say interesting. Absolutely, I did. It is. It's completely fascinating.
Yeah, I could agree with that because it's been like an evolution of listening to like my inner guidance system, which is what which I really fundamentally want to help people really connect with. So it's been an evolution of listening to what is next, what is of the highest good for me and for all. So it's been quite the journey. I did not set out to do this. If you had told me you'd be calling yourself a mystic and spiritual guide, I would have not believed you. I mean, it sounds really cliche, but it's so true. Yeah. It really started with deep despair and depression. I felt like I didn't understand the meaning and purpose of life. I had a sequence of events that kind of like had me fall to my knees, another cliche saying, but in that space, I felt how dark that space can be and how the unknown can, has a potential of being overwhelming.
Yeah.
And on the same account, I felt this freedom to say, wow, this is where I need to be. As much as it feels uncomfortable, this is exactly where I need to be. And in that moment, I sort of set that intention to find out what this is, which turned out to be a spiritual awakening, which I didn't find out until like years later.
Yeah.
Find out what this is and get myself out and hold the hands of others along their journeys too. So after that sort of like dark night of the soul, I opened my heart to really taking care of myself. So I intuitively stopped eating meat. It just felt like that was what made sense for me at the time. Again, it wasn't like consciously thinking intuitively, like or consciously being intuitive. It was just something was calling me. I did things like that. I started working out and taking care of my body and really being mindful of my mindset around my health and fitness specifically. And so that first year was quite intense, but like as I continued to follow my heart, and then a couple of years from there, I knew I needed to start serving. And at the time, I was working 2 jobs. I mean, growing up in New York City is not easy for a single person in their 20s, at this point in my late 20s. But, you know, the hustle mindset has always been ingrained in me because we don't really have a choice. So I remember on one night I was sleeping and getting ready to go bartending because that was like my second job. And I cried myself like in that like moment of trying to take a nap. And I just felt like there has to be a way for me to start doing something. And
Yes.
that's when I left the bartending job. And in 2 weeks, I got a job at the gym. And that's a story alone, but it's amazing how things unfold naturally. And either we're in a really dark place of despair and wanting to get out, or we're in a place of joy and wanting to lean in. So like either one contrast kind of like helps us lean in to our path of least resistance. But anyway, so I ended up becoming a fitness instructor and wellness coach. And I created programs for people to help them really hold them accountable and be their friend along the way.
Yeah.
And that really worked out. And then I felt another nudge to lean in more to my spiritual path, which again wasn't a conscious effort of mine. I ended up finding Gabby Bernstein, took her course that cracked me open, really saw this major aspect of who I was as a spiritual person. And that was in 2019. And then when 2020 hit, I was like, oh, this is why I got the call, because I think that was a collective year of the dark night of the collective. So I think, so yeah, it's been an evolution, and I'm at this place now where I'm actively giving people more practical ways to integrate a spiritual understanding of their own into their daily life experiences.
Yeah, brilliant. And you came and you did the mindset coach certification program. I think it was back in, was it 2020 or 2021?
It was 2020. Yes.
Yeah, amazing. And in that process as well, I think there was an evolution for you of the way that you serve and integrate everything that you do, all of these tools around, intuition and awakening and mindset. Do you want to tell people a little bit about that process?
Yes. And thank you for bringing that up, because that was one of those pivotal moments. I received a sort of a message. One of them was go to Salem, Massachusetts, and the other one to become a mindset coach. And I went to Google, type that in. I found you, I read the program, and I was blown away by how aligned it seemed to be if I truly want to help people. Because at this point, it's been a very intuitive process for me.
Yes.
I've just been listening to my gut and following those and seeing it working for me and seeing it work for others. And here I have this program that's embodying all that, even like the law of attraction part. Like you were able to bring so many different elements to mindset. That's not only that very conventional way we see mindset, but just a more expansive version of that. So I was blown away by doing the certification, and I was hitting a point again where it's like there's so much to learn and integrate even in my own journey, because that's the truth about owning a business in general, and then owning a business and following your calling and purpose. Like you're all over that. So it's constant work and Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it is interesting because one of the things I know is that everyone has their own definition of like what a spiritual awakening is. And I love that you've called your business the Mystic's Den, right? And can you tell people what you mean? What's your definition of mystic in the context of the work that you do?
So for me, mysticism means our connection with all that is, which sounds vague and abstract, but it's all through which we experience, both on the physical level and the psychological and spiritual, emotional level, the seen and the unseen aspects of our world. This includes all beings. This includes the planet itself, the solar system, the universe at large. And I believe each one of us have a direct connection with higher levels of consciousness, which is the awakened brain, which is a term I learned from Dr. Lisa Miller's work, and showing that there's actually parts of the brain that actually light up when someone has some sort of spiritual practice or is identified as religious. And it's amazing to look at that research and see how what I've experienced intuitively and in my heart is actually being proven through scientific research. And also to mention with her work is that it actually can decrease the potential of experiencing depression, which really comes back to the base of when I started to lean into my calling was coming from depression and mental health and stuff like that. So, so getting back to your question, what is mysticism in the realm of setting goals, tapping into our purpose and mindset, is widening our perception of the world around us, because mindset is our internal representation, right? Like understanding what's going on within us and how that's interacting with the world around us. And when we can develop a spiritual practice of our own kind, we're now widening the lens of possibilities.
Yeah.
So I think that's just incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And that possibility, and you mentioned that, the dark night of the soul, and people either come from the space of recognizing that something needs to change or leaning into something more. So two sides of that spectrum can be the catalyst for the spiritual awakening. So how can people listening to this recognize when they're either in or on the edge of that spiritual awakening for themselves? Is there a way that you can let people know that it's there, or it's happening, or about to happen?
I love that question. I'm always coming back to it. I think it comes down to understanding the difference between ego and the inner being, where the ego lives I would say it understands itself through the mind, which is separate thoughts, it's judgment, it's analyzing, which I believe ego has a lot of negative connotations to it, but I believe ego is the reason why we're able to sit here and have a conversation. It is the separate self, and that kind of ties into like tapping into our higher self and coming to the wholeness of who we are. That's going to be an interesting thing to see and evolve, how we interchangeably use ego and higher self. Like perhaps they're both the same. I don't know. Anyway, that's a separate tangent, but knowing the difference between ego as the separate self and the inner being as the one with all that is, connection with all that is.
Yeah.
And the difference is, when we are over analyzing a situation, we're not analyzing is healthy, right? We want to weigh out the pros and cons. We want to figure out this works best for us, if we should go a different direction. There's so many different variables. If we're stuck in that story and feeling the pressure of having to choose a specific way and controlling the content of our lives, then we're tipping the scale as more of the separate self and identified as the separate self.
Yeah.
When we connect with our inner being and our inner knowing, that takes practice. That takes practice in regulating our nervous system. That's connecting with the body. Yeah. And that's connecting with the heart. It's what I would say, like the big difference between ego and inner being is, with inner being, the emotion is neutral.
Yes.
It's not moving it's not moving within the contrast.
Yeah.
It's anchored in all of contrast, if that makes sense.
And it just is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's how I would explain that. And a way to practically apply that in our lives is not only when we're going to that yoga class or doing a meditation in the morning, or choosing a something mindfully when we're choosing to eat, my most spiritual awareness, like my strengthening of a spiritual awareness, came through being on the New York City subway. It came from being in conversation with someone who makes me uncomfortable. It's leaning into that witnessing consciousness, that observer of our thoughts that is interpreting what it is around us. So I want to even ground ourselves more in that, is taking a deep breath throughout the day and check back in to what's happening here and now in our bodies and our space around us.
Yeah. So it's part of that whole, I love the fact that you brought up that, we're not just attending to this when we are at yoga or when we're meditating or doing our morning routine or journaling. We're attending to it all the time, because we can recognize both parts of us and have awareness of at any one time. And it's a matter of choice and choosing, as you say, to breathe in the moment, to step back and to tune in to ourselves. How are we? What's coming through to us? How are we responding? And noticing those reactions and responses and thoughts that we have as information for us, rather than just dampening them down or saying, let's get over it or get on with it or whatever it is, to really recognize and acknowledge those things. So, Christine, what are some of the most common roadblocks that you find people experience when they are tapping into that higher calling?
I would say one of them that I love diving into is our relationship with time. I believe a lot of us may fall into the trap of thinking there's not enough time.
Oh, yes.
When in reality, there is 24 hours in a day. And it's a matter of taking full responsibility of, I guess, like how we use time management to serve and honor where we are here and now and support us and where we plan on going. Yeah. So some things I do is I log in my time, and or I create a little chart for myself and what's going on that day, and kind of like a blueprint or like a roadmap for the week. That's the basis of what and that'll change. And I think when people move into the realm of spiritual awakening and spirituality, there's this misconception of going with the flow, which is a separate but interconnected conversation about being on your path of least resistance and being in the flow and listening and moving in the direction of what lights you up, or perhaps moving in the direction of resistance. But anyway, it's a separate topic, but it's taking full ownership of the time that you're given. So it's not about how much time we're putting in. It's about how intentional are we within the time that we are putting in. I mean, that mindset shift and understanding time and how we show up with time, I guess this is more of my belief. I think it relieves us of or perhaps prevents us from getting so much in the head of it and getting consumed within all the doing, because there's so much going on in each of our lives. So to juggle all of that it's a skill, and maybe a different way of approaching time may serve us at a higher level, I guess.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think with time can pass really quickly or really slowly. It's the same amount of time depending on what you're doing and what you're experiencing and how much you're enjoying what you're doing. When we're enjoying something, when we're engaged and we're excited, it passes really, really quickly. When we're not those things, it passes very, very slowly. And it's very interesting, the relationship that we do have with time, and acknowledging that there is all the time in the world and there is also a finite time. And it's that duality, right? When we're wanting to achieve things in our lives, in our businesses, and even if by achieve, I mean relax even, right? We recognize that, there is that duality of infinite and the finite in terms of time. Yeah. So is one of the tools then that you use with people is just to really bring that notion of time into reality through that time management and through that planning?
Yes.
Yeah. And what sorts of is there something else that you would use, or some other roadblock in addition to time? I mean, time is a very common one.
Yeah. I would say what's interesting, and I see a lot too on our paths of spiritual awakening and, tapping into our purpose, it does bring up the conversation around inner work and healing. And I think it's important for us to reimagine or rewrite the story of healing, because I think it becomes a chore, it becomes a to-do list, because we've been operating through that lens of making lists, that very, I guess, masculine sort of way of going about
organizing.
our anyway. but healing is the path. And something I've learned is that it's who we are. Healing is who we are. Healing is wholeness and love. And anything that we do towards or in contribution to our healing is not, is separate from that.
Want to learn more about how you can become a certified mindset coach? Head on over to our website, www.mindsetcoachacademy.com/coach certification, and you'll find all the information that you need, along with a button to book a call with me to talk about how you can become the best coach you can be.
It's a process. I think this is one of the things as well that we think about with, if we call it the work in inverted commas, like personal development, spiritual awakening, that it's not boundaried. It's not, I'm going to tick that off my to-do list because I've done it now, I'm finished. It's an ongoing evolution as we grow and evolve and we age and we experience. There are always new things that come up for us, and always new challenges to overcome, always new joys to experience. So, it is an evolution rather than, oh, I've done that now. It's finished.
Yeah, and it kind of ties into the conversation around time, because you just, as you say, you remind me of that our healing path is not about diving back into the past and cleaning it all up so that we can move forward and design our future. I believe healing is being present with what's happening here and now, because the path will continue to repeat itself if it needs to. And I believe when we're connected with our inner knowing, we'll know when to show up and do the work that will expand us into more joy and freedom and happiness and peace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of this is as well just about acknowledgement, and being vulnerable and acknowledging when we're not feeling great, or when we are, and recognizing when we are feeling great as well, right? And again, that duality of emotion and experience, because it's all information. Emotions are such brilliant guides for us every single day. And I think a lot of people don't take enough time to even just ask themselves, how am I feeling now? So in that space, when you are taking a deep breath, how am I feeling now? And just tuning into those emotions, because otherwise we don't really have that guidepost for our experience. How am I feeling in this moment? Which is just, it's so powerful for creation, right? Yeah. And for knowing what to do or not to do, as the case may be, right? Because sometimes it's as much about inaction and doing nothing as it is about taking action or being proactive. So, yeah. And
it's definitely a journey of strengthening that. And I think as long as we are here, we'll continue to be strengthening our connection with our trusting in ourselves and knowing what not to do, what to do. And yeah, it's so true.
And which part of us is recognizing, oh, here I go again, I'm repeating this pattern, or here I go again, this belief has popped up. What part of us is recognizing that, Christine?
Yeah, it's definitely both parts of us, ego and the inner being. And I think it's, where are we as the ego or the inner being that's noticing this pattern? I think when we can see it through the inner being, we understand that our patterns come in like a spiral. So we may revisit the same pattern. If we say, oh, here I am going about this again, it's most likely coming from the ego, I believe, because we're seeing it as, here I go again, I got to do all this work again. Whereas the inner being knows, ooh, thank you, you've come up again. I'm ready to tackle, sort of chip away at this or crystallize it, bring some conscious light to it. And through that, it starts to, crystallize, I guess the right word would be. But yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because when we acknowledge and when we recognize the patterns and when we learn the lesson from the pattern, what is this trying to teach me or tell me? That's when we can stop doing it. Because we say, we don't need to do that anymore. We don't need to run that thought or that belief or that emotional response anymore, because we understand that we've learned the lesson of why we do it. And often that's grounded in, I want to be safe, I want to be secure, I want to feel a certain way, I want to protect myself. And so the understanding of that helps us to release. And again, that's a process of both inner being and ego working kind of in alignment with one another to do it. I think you used the phrase chip away. So just to release it, right? To release it off. So when we think about mindset, and we think about mindset, tips from the lens of the spiritual awakening, what are some tips that you would give to our audience around mindset?
I would say use the mind to connect with the heart.
Yeah.
And it's still speaking to the ego and inner being, analyzing, sifting, and sorting through the information versus and knowing what is our next step, or when to step back or lean in. So I would say in order to apply that, and I think we've tapped into that through our conversation, is connecting with our inner guidance system, which is that spiritual awareness, that witnessing consciousness, that deep breath. And I would say when it comes to mindset and building a spiritual, resilient mindset, is not judging when things are going, quote unquote, wrong. It's understanding that whether it's resistance or the experience of expansion and joy are both serving us, because it's that information that we get to observe and witness and move toward, so either way. And that takes practice, I think.
How can we practice? I mean, is it, when we think about awakening and intuition, can you share with people, like, how can we tune in? Is it an emotional response? Is it a voice in our, we all have the little voice, how does that play out? What should we be looking for?
Something that's really served me is connecting with my body, which we did tap into a bit too, is what is the emotional response? What is the thought that is playing with this emotional response? That's one. Connection with our bodies. And again, like doing practices that are going to help regulate our nervous system. As someone who, like I told you, was in New York City my whole life, when I moved out to the mountains in Pennsylvania in 2021, I noticed I would wake up in the morning and my heart would be pumping because I'm so used to being on the go. So I did, practice yoga nidra, and that really served me. So I think when we're talking about connecting with our emotional body, and our body is doing some sort of somatic practice, it's going to help us tune into that. Another thing I would say is detecting the universal signs and synchronicities we experience when we begin. And learning also, and it comes to allowing the information to be received, is rather, instead of jumping right away to identifying the meaning of it, allow it to sort of play out, see if it comes up again, see where it leads us. Another thing I like to do is when, say, I see a repeating number that I've recently identified with, or like it's been coming up often for me, I kind of tune into, what was I thinking when that had come up for me? And it's coming back to, what are the thoughts that are circulating my mind? What are the emotions? And how is my external world mirroring what's going on in my inner world, and vice versa?
And that recognition, like you talked about, when you left bartending, 2 weeks later, you had a job at a gym, right? And that's, that is an example of, there's always something that's going to fill the space, and we just need to be paying attention to those opportunities and recognizing that the universe does respond to us, right? To our thoughts and our emotions. And it brings things into our conscious awareness, or it potentially brings things into our awareness, whether we're conscious of them or not. And so making them conscious is just so key, absolutely, that we are paying attention. And so do you then, maybe journal about those correlations? Or is it just a mental note that you make? I was thinking this thought and then this happened. You just make a mental note of it, or do you write it down?
That's one way, is the mental note. And also journaling was one of my main practices when I first started. I don't do it quite often anymore. Now it's become channeling through writing, which serves me and others. I think also on that note, I think everyone does have some sort of channel to higher consciousness that may come in a different form. But another way is using a planner. I love noting down perhaps an intention I planted or a synchronicity that happened. I get to look back because there's so much going on. We can't remember everything. So it's like, what was happening in April of 2021? And I can look back because I have years of my journals, like my planners.
Yeah.
That's what I mean, like a planner. So that's another way of doing it. Or maybe even writing down our dreams. We can have downloads through our dreams, write it down, sit with it, maybe go on Google, type in what the dream was and kind of sit with it for a minute, because I also keep coming back to the idea of having to create meaning so quickly. I think we do a disservice to our connection and communication with the universe. So, building that space.
Yeah, so powerful. I think curiosity, as we all know, is one of the powerful qualities of a coach, being curious. And I think we extend that to ourselves, being curious about ourselves, our own reactions, responses, and meanings, but not in a way, we can go on Google and have a look. But then we, as you say, we sit with it. So if we're seeing 222, we go to Google and we say, what does that mean? I'm seeing this angel number, repeating itself. And then it's about the reflection of, what is this message for me? What is it actually trying to say? What do I intuitively think it's telling me?
And I think to add to that is what's so powerful about the spiritual awakening is it's a deeper understanding of who we are. So it comes back to our authenticity. So for me, angel numbers doesn't resonate, right? So it's finding our own language and understanding the signs through which we experience.
Yeah.
And I believe what's happening in the world right now is this massive collective awakening. And because we're learning more about who we are at the fundamental level of who we are. And I believe the more of us who can lean into that and do this work, which I think a lot of us are, and I'm really grateful for the coaching space and community and what's happening, because it's building momentum on the power of our minds and our power of choice, and that we can in any moment choose again and choose how we wish to interact with the world around us.
It is powerful. And I think it's the choosing of the interpretation. It's the choosing of the living. It's we do get to choose. Every day we make 1,000 choices in our lives. And sometimes we forget that we have that power to choose and to make a change and to transform. And it is all within us. As is the knowing, when we really get to know ourselves, as is the knowing of, this is what I really desire. This is what I want for my life. And I think as coaches, we are in the space of working with people to help them to fully unlock and express what it is that they desire, and to own that, and to feel like they don't have to make, it's them, it's what they desire, bringing it into conscious awareness so that then we can, help them to create that reality for themselves. So, it is so powerful to be spending time in that space. And no matter what we call it or what we believe in, fundamentally the principle of awakening and higher consciousness is, just that ability to really know yourself. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is so powerful. Now, I want to go back to one point before we wrap up the call. You said that when you left New York and you moved to Pennsylvania, you would wake up in the morning and your heart would be pounding because your body was so used to having that response to that environment. How long did it take? Is that still happening for you? How long did it take for you to, for your body to readjust?
I would say up to 6 months. Yeah. And I do the yoga nidra I'm getting certified in it because
brilliant.
It is incredible. Practice. Yeah, it took a while. I mean, 6 months is not a long time, but it's a consistent effort, and it's amazing how your body is still operating. Yeah,
absolutely. It's operating with those ingrained responses that you've grown up with for all that time, and it is, the body has so much to tell us when we listen. It really does. And I always say, it is mind and body are one, and it does have so much information. And I love, even Louise Hay wrote the book You Can Heal Your Life, and the relationship between our emotional state and our physiology is just so powerful when we look at that symptomology. So this is such a broad topic. It really is, and we could be talking for hours, I know, because it is really, really interesting. But let's and we'll bring you back on actually to have another chat, because these topics are very interesting, and I'm sure that everyone's found this a very valuable episode. So just to wrap up, how can people connect with you? You have some reminders that you send. So just tell people how people can connect with you, and we will drop the links down below. But just share, Christine, how can people get in touch?
Yeah, so I have my website. I'm also on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. My favorite platform is Instagram. I have actually 2 accounts on there. I have my, coaching practice one, the one that's been evolving with me throughout the years. And my secondary one, which has picked up a lot of momentum, is where I channel, I was saying before that I channel through writing, and then I pretty much do a voiceover, and I produce these little clips that I post on Instagram.
And they're fabulous, by the way. If you haven't seen Christine in action, let's tell us the handle, Christine.
So mine is Christine Zaroura. The other one is Inner World Mystic, which just, the name just came to me. By the way, I didn't mention that I didn't research mystic and then identified as it. It's weird, but anyway, Inner World Mystic, and amazing, 3,000 followers in 8 months. I mean, that's something I couldn't have strategize, because I'm not into marketing strategy. So there's that. And then the other thing is right now I'm currently sending out every week a reminder. It's called The Reminder, where it's a channeled message, but it's about 3 minutes long or so. So it's longer than those shorter clips. And just the intention for that is to help people anchor into the truth of who they are, connect with their inner being, remember that they are on the path. And
yeah, brilliant. Love it. Do please check out Christine, and we'll put the links below so they're handy for you there. Sign up for a reminder, because again, they are brilliant as well. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute delight having you here again, Christine.
Thank you for all your work.
My absolute,
I love your work.
Look, it's an absolute pleasure, and we will get you back on in a couple of months' time, and have another chat about some of the other topics that we didn't quite get to cover here today. So thank you very, very much.
Well, that wraps up this week's episode of the Mindset Coach podcast. Remember to join us next week for another episode, and subscribe on iTunes. Leave us a review if you've loved it. Share it with your friends. And I really look forward to learning how you're implementing the tools and techniques that you're learning here. Mindset is everything.